Travis, welcome to the second episode of BJJ Eastern Europe podcast. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm pretty well, pretty well. Always in a bit of a rush, but it's all right. It's morning there. Have you already done your morning training session, or is it just gonna come up later on?
It comes up later on in the afternoon, but due to, the COVID crisis, there's not a lot of training going on. I usually get my workout in later on at night when I do like the live YouTube sessions.
That's something that you've been really upping lately, but despite not taking into account the current coronavirus situation, how does your training schedule look like? So it's basically, as you said, it would be in the afternoon and in the evening, or just once per day?
Usually it's more structured around teaching since I'm not really an athlete anymore. So I usually run no-gi afternoon classes. Sometimes I get to work out in them, sometimes I don't. After that, it's usually judo and jiu-jitsu at night for about 2.5 hours. But again, mostly just teaching. I do a few rounds with the guys, but mostly teaching.
So it's not as structured as it used to be. It's more of like free-flowing or?
Yeah, exactly. Now that I'm not an athlete, I don't have to work out. Yeah. And I usually only get to work out when there's an odd person on the mat.
Oh, right. So when you don't have to like supervise other people or?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you enjoy this more? Like, of course, taking all of the other things into consideration, the injuries and, the pressure of competitive training. Do you enjoy this freestyle sort of approach to training more than the competitive one?
No, I prefer the competitive one. Life was a lot easier as a competitor. Balancing work, life, and trying to, get a workout in. It's a little harder than when your work and life is working out. And it's a lot more fun when you're professional because you're in shape. You can do the things you want to do. Sometimes you're limited by, how stressful like your work day was. Sometimes I have really bad sessions because I have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to like start my day to get a project done in time for some product launch or something. And then it runs all the way into like a 9 o'clock training session at night.
Yeah.
And you're just tired, but you got to get through it. Yeah.
But how do you, this might be actually good also for the readers and for the listeners to know, the present situation compared to the competitive ones in terms of your energy dispersion, in terms of your energy allocation and your time schedule. What kind of advice would you give to someone who is really struggling to make it to a more of a, maybe not professional side of jiu-jitsu and or judo, but that's trying to become as good as they can on the competitive scene, while on the other hand, they might have a job that could or could not be, connected to the sport itself, while they have the family, all of the other obligations?
I think a lot of it has to do with just making sure that you show up. I think a lot of people, and I find it even with some of my students, right? They try to show up to training sessions where they feel 100% and they can give 100%, instead of thinking of it as, I just need to give 100% of what I have left. And if you're trying to reach that next level, it's an important distinction. Even if you feel run down, beaten up, shoulder sore, knee sore, like you have to show up and participate to the best of your ability that you can without holding back, instead of pulling yourself out and saying, I just need a rest day. Nah, I was a little banged up. I'm just going to stay home. Like you always have to show up. There's always something you can do at the gym to improve. And I think a lot of people struggle with competition selection more than, hey, I want to compete. And they just try to compete as much as possible. They don't systematically look at the level of every event and then start picking and choosing. So because winning is a habit, you have to learn how to win when you compete. The people with the best jiu-jitsu don't necessarily, or the best judo, win world titles. There's a lot of competition strategy and tactics and knowing how to play the game, play the scoreboard, play the referee. The flow of matches, your conditioning while you're in matches is different than in the gym. And all of that is learned through competing. But most people just jump in the deep end and like, I'm just going to go compete and give it my best shot. And it's not really how you develop as a professional athlete. or anybody looking to reach that next level.
So you're basically saying, if I'm not mistaken, sure, go out and compete, but be kind of picky of the competitions that you choose,
Yeah.
because those competitions will kind of determine the next level of competitiveness that you're going to get, the actual skill level that you're going to develop, and the experiences that you're going to develop through these competitions.
Yeah. Like we face it here all the time in USA Judo because we don't actually regulate really where people go. Like there's a stipulation to it, but you can always get a waiver and like call in and beg to let you compete. But what I find is when people jump too far too soon and they just keep trying, like they're doing the same workouts as everybody else, but they almost get comfortable with losing, or they get comfortable with the idea of, I almost made it, or man, I was really in there, I almost beat that guy. Like there's a difference between winning and losing, and that gap, no matter, even if you fought like the world champion and you were winning until the last 30 seconds and then lost, you still lost, whether you lost in the first 30 seconds or the last second on the clock. And being able to pull out that win, there's still a skill gap there that you have to learn how to do and how to manage. And I feel like people get comfortable thinking the other way, where it's like, I was in it, I almost had him. Had I only done this, I would have won. And they cling on to these false hopes because they're not learning and educating themselves and getting into the competition flow and strategy.
Yeah, so it's something like an example that crosses in my mind. It's like, when people bet, it's not that they continue betting because they win. It's because how close they get to the actual win. It's like, oh, it
Exactly.
almost took me, like, if I only made this small correction, then I would have won it. And that's something that keeps them on, that keeps them driving, but in a very, very bad way, of course.
But good gamblers use the actual stats to like place their bets, and then they become successful because they played over like 10 years. Whereas like the degenerate gambler, they're going off their gut instinct, because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
And when
they
it does,
love
it
the
feels
rush.
amazing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned just earlier that sort of a gap that has to be overcome. That's sort of a threshold that has to be overcome if somebody wants to go from I almost made it to consistently making it in competitions or winning or just learning new things, right? What have you found through your own experience, on your individual personal level, and through the experience of teaching others? What's the biggest gap within that gap, perhaps, that has to be overcome? And what should be the focus for most people?
I think a lot of people don't understand the mental side of sports, and they tend to go off the individual basis. A good way of thinking of that is, if I, like when I fought Yuri at Fight to Win, and then I was coming off my Olympic performance, I think like a year before. Like there is a massive skill gap between where I was at the Olympic Games and where I was when I was fighting Yuri. From a strength and conditioning standpoint to an athleticism standpoint to where my mind was, right? People don't know it, but I was in another country that day. Like that morning, I woke up and drove down from Montreal to Boston to make it in time for Fight to Win. Because I was coaching a kids camp up there, but people don't understand that when you're on the Fight to Win stage, like how mentally involved and how mentally focused is the judo competitor compared to the jiu-jitsu competitor on a Fight to Win stage. It's not a full reflection of my own personal capabilities. No different than like a Lucas Lepre who wins world titles at the IBJJF. Like how mentally is he in it really at like the Austin IBJJF Open? And people tend to like look at it as, oh man, so-and-so did really well against Lepre at this thing. But like Lepre's teaching classes, teaching privates, doing clinics. Like the Dallas Open to him is like a stepping stone. It's just this thing he does in order to win the world title. You get a much different beast of an athlete on the day.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a different player at the Olympic Games. I'm a different player when all my heart and soul is put into winning this event than, you know, at that local thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens is athletes look at like the worst possible case of an athlete. And then they're like, you know, I could handle it, because they're comparing their best to that person's like, I'm not really in it today.
To their worst,
And then
basically.
and they try to like bring them closer together to make them feel better.
Yeah.
And then when they step up on the real stage, they get smoked.
Mm.
I think Lucas Lepre actually did that to a guy who like tapped him at like a camp he did. I think that was him. And the guy was like posting about it, and it was like Lepre's like 40th round after going with everybody at the camp. And then Lepre scored like 50 points on him at like an IBJJF event.
Man,
Like different.
Just yesterday I was talking with Lepre. If the positions were different, I could have asked him.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it is him. I might have just totally made that up, but I believe that is a true story that actually happened with like a big name when he was teaching a camp or clinic. Because again, they're not really in it, right? They're training, they're having fun, they're doing certain things. Like, you want to put something on the line, like let's put something on the line and let's prepare for it. And you get a much different person. And that's that gap that people really struggle with. You know, I hear it a lot from people all the time, like, hey, so-and-so beat so-and-so and I can beat them. That means I can beat them, right? And it's like, no. Just because John beat Tim and you can beat John doesn't mean you can beat Tim. It's a different game. But people are always trying to like attach themselves and raise themselves up off the hard work of others, instead of just looking at themselves saying, what have I really accomplished? And what can I really like hang my hat on as a grappler? Judo or jiu-jitsu, I think everyone does it. And I think it's just human nature.
Yeah, it's just sort of like to elevate yourself whenever you can, but it's a good thing as you have it, like in your own personal example, of course, to have developed that sort of a self-awareness, I assume, to notice when you're doing those things which don't really elevate you, but that are, at least in your mind, lowering other people down. How did you, I mean, one of the things that I personally respect perhaps the most about you, and I assume, and I'm pretty certain that a lot of our readers do, is your hard work ethic. And it's your sort of a really aggressive approach in terms of not an aggressive approach in terms of, you know, when something needs to get done, something will be done in the best possible way. Has that always been the case for you, like all the way since you were, I believe, 6 or 7 years old when you started training judo? Or was it something that you developed along the way?
I don't know if this will make sense for you, but have you ever heard the saying, like, the grass is greener on the other side?
Yeah.
Right? So if we take that saying into account, where people on one side of the fence always look at the other side saying, oh, you have it so good. Like, as a former professional athlete, like I hear it all the time, like all these people who are like, oh, you know, I'd be a world champion if I could only train full time. You know, no one will sponsor me. Like, they're not going to pay me to do it, but I could do it. Then do it. But you can't. If you're not willing to put it out on the line, then why should somebody else? And I was fortunate enough when I was younger to have lost athletics in my life. Like, when I was 11, I suffered a really bad knee injury and I couldn't play sports for 4 years.
What happened?
A kid shot a double leg and he wrapped his hands around my ankle and his shoulder hit me in the kneecap. And he speared my knee and it went straight through. And when I fell with my butt on the floor, he did a forward roll and his shoulder was in my kneecap and it folded my leg.
Yeah, even further. So
yeah. And I had to learn how to walk. I was on crutches on and off for like 2 years. it was a terrible experience as a kid, but I was on the other side of the fence, right? Like I went from being a multiple time junior national champion in judo to we're not going to do sports ever. We're done. Like the idea of even PE class and participating was like off the table. I remember being able to take my brace off and just dribble a basketball and then shoot by myself was like, that was a great class for me. Mm. You know, my mile time in high school was 10:02. Cause like my legs just don't work in that fashion anymore. Even till this day, my best recorded mile time is like 7 minutes. Yes, my absolute best. And my average is like 8 minutes. Like if I were to go for a run right now, I'd be lucky to hit an 8-minute mile. I mean, partly because I sit at a computer desk all day, but just the injuries that I've had to my legs, they just don't work. And since I've had that other side where I'm looking at everybody else being athletes going, oh, you guys are so lucky. When I came back to sports, I don't want the other life. Like I never wanted to go back. Like I was all in it. Like whatever I set for a goal, like we're doing it. If I said I was going to do judo 3 times a day, I did judo 3 times a day. Even if that meant my training partner bailed and then I had to get like a band and I had to do some push-ups and I had to run in the rain, I had to run in the snow. Like you make it work, right? People always think like, if I'm not at 100% of everything I need, it's not worth my time. Instead of just doing something, doing anything, like you'll just be so much better for it. Even in the crisis we're going through right now, people who can't train jiu-jitsu and can't do judo, they're all like, what's the point? Like, it's not like I can do judo. Like I'm going to be out of shape when I come back anyways. And they bag it. It's like, no, wake up, run 3 miles in the morning, do 1,000 push-ups throughout the day, do sets of 100 10 times, do like 100 body weight squats and just do it. What difference does it make? It's just training your mind to get the job done. It doesn't matter, you know, what happens when you come back. It's out of your control. But as long as you're getting the job done, you're training that idea and your mentality of I set a goal, I accomplished my goal, whatever that goal may be. And even now, like now that I'm back on the other side of the fence as like an injured, broken athlete in business, I want no part of the professional lifestyle. Like I actually like the idea that I can stand there and go, oh, you look a little tired. Oh, I'm gonna take your head off this round. Here we go. Get all excited. Like I like walking out of my office onto the mats 40 minutes in when they're kind of done with their speed drills. Tired. Yeah, already tired. I put my gi on. I take my fingers. I eyeball everybody. Okay, guys, we're ready to go live. And I'm like, yep, no warm up. Here we go.
And this is for your own good, right?
That's for me. Like I love it. Yeah. And it's beneficial to them because if I did all the drills and I was dragging, I'm not anywhere near in good enough shape to like make it through the whole training session. But a couple of 5-minute rounds with anybody in the world, no problem.
How have you managed to, you had that really serious knee injury when you were really, really young, and you had a lot of other injuries, up until the point that you were prepping for the 2012 Olympic Games. How have you managed to actually work around these injuries? And do you have some sort of either specific, again, based on your own individual experience advice, or some sort of a really general sort of one? So basically, how is it that you manage to stay highly competitive and keep on winning at the highest levels, despite all of these setbacks in forms of not the current setback of, okay, I can't have a sparring partner to train with because there's a coronavirus, but hey, my knee is injured. I can't do an X, Y, Z amount of moves.
Yeah, it's one of the things that makes me a much different athlete than most, especially in judo. I'm a very diverse athlete when it comes to judo. Like I don't just have like these 2 or 3 moves, like 4 moves that are like, oh, this is how I throw you. My judo, like my individual technique may not be as sharp as somebody who solely practices that one thing and specializes in it, right? Like my Ippon Senagi versus Koga's is better. But I have other throws that he doesn't, that like my Newaza compared to his. Like I'm just so much higher in that realm than where he is in Newaza. So I'm a very overall good judo player. Like whether we're fighting on the ground, whether we're grip fighting, whether we're just trying to throw each other, I can pretty much hang with anybody in any one of those fields. And then when people specialize in throwing, right, and they're a little bit higher than me, they tend to neglect the gripping and the Newaza, which I have the other two buckets. So when somebody outperforms me in the throwing statute, I fight as if I'm in only the other two buckets, and I focus solely on gripping and Newaza and the tactics of the judo match in order to beat that person. And I was able to do that because, like I said before, there's always something you can do in the gym, right? Like I remember I went to Tokai in 2015, and 3 days before I left, I tore the muscle in my right hand. And I was like, well, I guess I can't do traditional judo because I couldn't really hold on to a collar. I actually had to put a brace on my hand in between all the training sessions just to get the muscle in the joint to relax. And then I had to do this weird taping thing, and it was like a giant mitt so that I could work out. But all of like my one-handed throws, my off the grip attacks, my headlocks, like my Seyanagis, all with one hand, I just worked on it. And if I lost because I couldn't hold on with my right hand, like I get it. I'm not upset about it. It's just part of learning. Like you learn how to play defense from those deficits so that you can be offensive in ways you can be offensive. Where a lot of athletes would have stayed home and been like, I can't go, I can't do judo, I can't grab with my right hand, I better do some rehab. I looked at it as just an opportunity to train these other parts and bring focus to it. And if I lose because of it, it's just practice. Again, I'm a different beast when I'm all in it the day of, mentally prepared, physically prepared, ready to go.
Yeah, in comparison to the, everyday grind of just trying to get better and trying to learn more things. But I mean, it's not often the case that a silver medalist in judo in Olympics and a black belt under the famous John Danaher is also a really good teacher in of himself.
Yeah, he's probably one of the best. Like I was shocked when I took his class for the first time.
Like, why did you go to Danaher's class in the beginning? I mean, I know that you were injured, that you decided to practice your Newaza a little bit more, but what led you to Danaher's class, actually?
No idea. I didn't even know he existed.
I mean, to Renzo's, actually.
Oh, so Henzo and Jimmy Pedro, my judo coach, have a working relationship. So I remember when I broke my foot because I had a Liz Frank fracture before the 2012 Olympics. And I walked into the office with Jimmy and I was like, I got to do something. I said, like, maybe I can do jujitsu and I can just sit on my butt and like work my grips and my positioning and grapple because I don't have to stand on my foot. And he goes, it's not a bad idea. Like, why don't I call Henzo? He's one of the guys I know. He's one of the best in the world. Like, I'll just call him up and see if you can go to New York. And I was like, let's do it. And then Henzo said, yeah, sure, show up. And I drove down the next morning. And by the time you drive from Boston at 6 a.m. and you get to New York, it's usually around noon by the time you fight all the traffic. And that's John's class. So I walked in day one, not knowing what to do. And John's class was there.
Yeah, but I mean, it hasn't been that you didn't really know what to do. It has been, as far as I've read, like a couple of training sessions afterwards, it was like you came to a purple belt, and within a year and a half, it was a black belt, right?
A little bit longer than that.
A little bit longer.
But I had trained with jiu-jitsu guys before. Like I used to go to AKA, the American Kickboxing Academy out in California, because I used to go to San Jose State. And Dave Camarillo was a former San Jose State alumni on the judo team, and he was the jiu-jitsu instructor there. So in the mornings when everybody else was in school, I used to drive to AKA to train. And like I used to work out with Josh Crosscheck, Josh Thompson, John Finch, all those guys we used to just grapple on the ground.
Mm.
It's not so much like a teaching thing, but it was their sparring time. And I liked the physicality.
Mm.
So like I had an idea of what to do. Like
Mm.
I wasn't totally lost.
Mm. So it's basically you had the experience prior, but you still, I mean, it's of course, it's not just the
Like,
experience in the yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, like at the time, like when I walked into Henzo's, if somebody was like, "Hey, De La Hiva," I
Mhm.
stone cold, like I wouldn't have known what to do.
Mm.
Like
Mm.
somebody, like I remember my first class was John, was actually how to pull X guard, and I was like, Jesus Christ. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do a Tomonagi, and then I'm gonna try to figure it out.
Okay. Okay.
Like I had no idea what any of
Improvisation.
those things were.
But how did you learn at such a fast pace? Was it the specifics of, just having the right learning habits taken from judo mixed up with John's, unique teaching style and unique actual way of explaining things? Or was there something more to it?
Here's the one like thing that I think a lot of people, if they're listening to this, hopefully people like timestamp it and like save it, because the biggest mistake that everybody has when they learn is they try to justify or project their own insecurities onto whatever the teacher is teaching. And they do they do it with questions like, well, I would just do this and that wouldn't work. Right? Like I
Mm.
just released an Instagram post yesterday, right? Thread went crazy of like, I'll just take his back. I'll just
Of,
arm drag you and take your back.
of
And it's
the
like,
like the guard break that you did, or
yeah. And it's like, all of you are just so naive to what is actually happening because you're projecting what you think is right instead
Mhm.
of like admitting that you don't know everything and that the person showing the move probably is showing the move because he knows a little bit more than you. So when I go into John's class, he's in charge of the class. He's obviously qualified to teach this class. And if he's inside Henzo School as one of the world-renowned best jiu-jitsu guys to have ever walked the face of the planet, and John is somebody that he has put in charge of this class, he's clearly qualified. Who am I to say he's wrong?
Mm.
If John says, hey, this is how you do it, let's go. I'm an athlete. I can do that.
Mm.
But everybody else tries to bend and twist and like make it their own because they want it to be better instead of taking it for what it is.
Mm.
And the one good thing I love about John's class, and the reason why I think a lot of his athletes get better faster, is there's no what ifs. Like,
Meaning.
meaning like when you teach a technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's applied during a certain application, like a certain specific time in the grappling scenario, right? Like that guard break that I did, right? It has its place in opening up the closed guard, right? If I'm fighting somebody who is constantly trying to arm drag me, am I probably doing that technique?
Yeah.
No.
Mm.
I'm probably doing a San Paulo pass because I'm not a dumb grappler.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have its place. So when John's teaching a technique, it's taught for a very specific scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
it's
okay.
used for that. Like, it's not this like, well, I would just do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the teacher goes, well, if you did that, I would do this. And then the student over here is like, well, I would do this. And it turns into this who's going to counter who scenario.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And people are just projecting because they don't want to take the move for what it is. I went into John's class and was like, yes, John.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, John.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that, John. Sure. Okay. No problem. 100 times. Got it. You want to play from this position? Sure. And a lot of the people who are just starting out in jiu-jitsu, even all the way up to brown belt, like I stop my students all the time. Like, what are you doing? Like, where did you learn that? Like, where did you come up? And they're like, well, I thought. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
but what qualifies you as somebody with 2 to 5 years of grappling experience to just think you know enough to just fabricate a move while you're training that's going to work?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like before, it's that golf swing mentality where it's like, oh, but I did it against this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite quote that I tell all my students is, so you beat a dumbass with some bullshit, and now you're going to justify it as a legitimate move.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh,
Yeah. How
you
does that make
guys,
sense?
yeah, you guys focus on the things that work against everybody, whether it's a white belt or a black belt. Focus on that technique. Don't focus on the one-off trick that you did in a round. I catch a lot of people with tricks, but I know the difference between a trick and something that works against everybody. That like A game material versus the flashy stuff that you sprinkle into your jiu-jitsu on the side.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, if you want your fancy stuff to work, you have to get your A game down, because
Exactly.
it's like, I think I understand what you mean. It's like sometimes you'll see guys hitting specific moves in training, and you kind of know that that's not because they meant to do it. It's like it just kind of
Yeah.
happened. And if you have the A game down, if you have really put your time and focus, as you're actually saying, into
Yeah.
perfecting what your teacher, what your coach, what your instructor, what your professor is telling you to do, you'll get into the habit of actually noticing different things, into the
Exactly.
habit of seeing, okay, when I'm doing this ABC A part of my A game, and this guy does this or this girl does that, that's an opportunity for me to modify this move and actually go with that, instead of like, okay, I'll just do this and let's see what happens.
I like to, when we're not talking about submissions and we're talking about sweeping or guard passing, I like to, like when I'm teaching my students, I teach them like the first half or like the first 3/4. And then that last little bit, I'm like, guys, you just got to figure it out from here.
Hmm.
Because that, like, once you throw the lasso in, once you get the foot on the hip and the pant grip and you've got them locked down and you knock them off balance, how you actually finish the move is dependent upon your opponent's reaction. And I need my students to see it. That way, when they put themselves in position, they can start to see and feel all the different angles and possibilities there are to finish a sweep.
Hmm.
Like, I don't want to make a lasso, sweeping DVD and go, hey, sweep 1 at this angle, sweep 2, same position at angle 2, and do 15 different little angles, but from the same start. Instead of just teaching the start and then saying, hey, this last like 10% that you need, here's where I usually end up going. But like, they can play defense and you've got to be able to figure out the last little bit. Like, you got to have a little bit of intelligence. Don't just shut your brain off.
That kind of assures that people, as you said, actually aren't going through the motions. It's like if you teach
Yeah.
everything from A to Z, it's like, okay, I'll just
They
repeat
get
everything
locked
from A to
into it,
Z.
right?
Mm.
Yeah, they get stuck. They're like, but I didn't have that thing you said. And I go, so why didn't you just put your hand over here?
Yeah.
Because they're not thinking. They're not doing the activity. They're just trying to remember the steps. And it really hinders people's ability to learn.
So basically talking about open-mindedness when you're drilling and when you're actually rolling with somebody else, right? It's not like, just, drill this move for 100 times and then you got the muscle memory down and then everything is done and that's it. You'll know how to hit it when the competition day comes. It's like, in my view, it might be better, right? To maybe, okay, go 50 times through the motions just to get that muscle memory up. For example, somebody who's...
I probably go like maybe 5 or 10. Like,
Oh,
I
okay.
think anything above 20 is like a little ludicrous because it's not so much, like if I did it 200 times, right? Like, let's say I did a specific guard break like 200 times. And then I went to work and I came to jiu-jitsu after the weekend. Am I going to remember all the steps?
Yeah.
Probably not, because probably by about like 30, knowing I got to do 200, I just check out. I'm just like going through it. Whereas when you stick to a smaller number, but you actually come back to it at a later date and try to recall it, because it's about the recall of information. It's not just about right now. Like, here's a test. Next time when the gyms open up, okay, I want you as a student, when you're in your class, for everybody listen here, I want you to listen to whoever's teaching you what to do. think about this, listen, and then just watch. And then what I want you to do is I want you to walk away to your partner and I want you to repeat everything the coach said.
Mm.
Because if you can't even do that, if you can't even just like mentally just remember the 5 or 6 steps they told you to do and repeat it, like actually verbalize it, how do you expect to actually grab your partner and do it? And what happens is students that aren't paying attention and able to actually recall the 5 or 6 steps and repeat it, they tend to go based on feel, where they're like, the foot kind of goes here. This kind of makes sense, right? Because I'm a blue belt and I know a little bit about what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And then I guess this would be an off balance point. And they're trying to make it up, right? Because they haven't trained themselves to like learn and listen. And that was one of the things I came with John. When I went to his class, I actually had that skill. So when John could teach me something, I could bang it out. 5 minutes, I'll do 5, you do 5, I do 3, you do 3. We'll do this for about 5 or 6 minutes. I go train with all the brown belts, purple belts, black belts. No problem. I can hit that move. Because I can recall the steps now. I just never knew. I just didn't know it existed.
Didn't know that those sorts of steps that you just described existed, like in terms of recollection?
Like I never thought in a million years, oh, I could collar drag into X guard and then hug the ankle and sweep somebody back.
Oh, okay.
Like, how would you ever fathom that not having been showed that?
It's very difficult to actually describe, to conceptualize for someone who hasn't seen it live and who hasn't been actually through the motions.
Yeah, and I had never actually seen anybody do it. I was like,
yeah,
what? Like it was just different. Like I remember my first no-gi class at Henzo's, and I was going with the guy named Luciano, who's actually one of the instructors at Hodger's Academy now. And he's like a $165, $170, and I'm an elite athlete. Like I'm a judo player. We're gonna start on our feet, and I know how to wrestle. Right? I can wrestle at a fairly high level. And I was like, oh, I was tired because it was like session number 2 or 3. And I remember Henzo was there and Henzo had paired us up, right? And I was like, okay. He's wearing a black and gray rash guard, which at the time I didn't even know was ranked. I had no idea. I thought he was just a kid. We're grappling. And he kind of like sticks his hand out. And so I pop his elbow. I shoot a high crotch. He throws in a guillotine, chokes me. And I went, what the fuck is this? And so I get frustrated and I'm like, okay, so I can't do that. So I start tapping him on the head. I'm in my wrestling stance because I'm clearly bent over too far. And I go to pick his leg and then he snaps me down and he puts in like a little like headlock. And then he slips in like a Marcelo guillotine. And like, I'm up there trying to take it off and he chokes me and I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? Like, it shouldn't be like this. Because even when you finish the takedown, you're still stuck.
Yeah.
But you're just unaware. It's got nothing to do with my ability or who has better takedowns or what sport is better. It's just not knowing. Once it was explained to me, I was like, oh, that ain't happening again. I got it. Got it, coach. No problem.
You have to kind of take it to heart. I mean, a lot of, myself included, students I feel sometimes have trouble in, how would I say, this is a good question, I believe. Like it depends, of course, on the teaching style of the instructor at hand, but more often than not, you're shown a lot of techniques. You're shown a lot of variations of the same technique, and once you actually disperse those techniques throughout the days, throughout the weeks, and throughout perhaps 1 month, it becomes a little bit too difficult to actually recollect something.
But again, that's because the students are trying to label everything as step 1, step 2, step 3, move 1, move 2, step 1, step 2, step 3. And instead of just saying like, oh, here's this idea, boom, I'm done with jiu-jitsu. Right? Like here's an idea, right? I remember John when he said this, I was like, gold, done. Anytime you can take 2 of your limbs and wrap them around one of your partners, you can break it. Done. Okay, so if I want to sub you and we're grappling, I know nothing about grappling, right? We're grappling. All I have to do is take 2 of my limbs, wrap them around one of yours, and without knowing anything, I know I can break it, figure it out. Figure it out.
So it's more of like trying to get accustomed to the broader picture, to the concepts, perhaps.
Dumb it down. Like, stop. Everybody's trying to make it complicated. Like, I see these Instagram videos with these like 15 move steps where their partner is standing there, and I'm like, what'd the other guy do? But when I watch people actually competing, I watch people pull off these like 3 move, 4 move techniques, and the other guy just stands there, and I'm like, what are you doing? It's like they can't follow along to what's going on. Imagine playing chess and I could move the pieces whenever I wanted.
Yeah.
Right? It's not move for move. Like if I decide to move a piece every second and you're like, what's he doing? Where's he going? And you haven't moved a piece yet, you're behind. Like you've got to at least keep up in the game. And I think that's where people get confused. Like I'm like 99% sure that when Keenan like developed the worm guard, all he did was go, I'm going to wrap this around my leg. Yeah, that was like step number 1. Yeah. And let's see what happens. And then he did it enough to say, okay, here are the 3 most common things that people do when I do this. What happens if I pass it around my leg and then I reach through my partner's leg and I grab it? And then he goes, okay, these are the 3 most common things that people do. He just figures it out. And then by doing that and consistently doing it, he builds this knowledge base of common things people do in reaction to his grips. And now he can develop a plan on countering it. Yes. Right? Like I remember this rule. I was getting ready for Copa Podio and I had broken my ankle or high sprained my ankle, something like a few weeks before. And we were sitting there with John and he was like, hey, so do you have any concerns about competing at Copa Podio? And I was like, yeah, like 50-50. I go, nobody here does it. There's some 50-50, like quote unquote experts in the competition. And I was like, I'm worried somebody's going to lock themselves in 50-50 and they're going to go for a foot lock. And I'm basically going to be kicking to play defense with no real way out. And John goes, well, that's easy. Just put your foot on their chest. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, if you could put your foot, the one that's between their legs, on the center of their chest, they can't foot lock you. So that's step 1. And I was like, done. Okay. Like I have no idea at this point how to get my foot from the 50-50 position to my partner's chest, but I understand what I'm supposed to do, right? And then he goes, well, once it's on their chest, guess what? It just slides out like a pipe. And I went, oh, done. So now I know when I'm in 50-50, step 1, foot on the chest. Step 2, slide it out. Easy.
So it's as far as I've understood, it's like the best way that you actually, not the best way, but the way that you got so proficient in it was, having on one side the luck of having a professor that's giving you enough structure, but also enough of a space to make your own variations, to figure things by yourself when you're actually on the competition podium. And on the other side, now is a position, like once you're a coach in this regard, like coaching others, it's like you've kind of transferred that into your own coaching capabilities. Isn't that correct? It's like
a little bit. A little bit. It's kind of this idea of, like when John's teaching, it's like he's teaching this specific move for this specific reason, for this specific application, regardless of does it have other applications, right? Like sometimes I see coaches confuse people because they're like teaching move A And then they realize they're like, oh, their partner could react in this way. So they explain it and they go, but if they do that, then you could do move B. So that's good over there. But let's go back to move A. And they've drifted, right? And they've lost that attention span because remember, as an athlete, you've got to be able to watch the coach and be able to walk away and repeat the steps verbally in order to know what to tell your body to do in order to actually practice 30 seconds once he's done. And when it's complicated, or like your other students are distracted by asking weird questions, it makes it challenging to learn because you get distracted.
So you kind of also drift away from the basic premise that you were holding. Do you have
when I teach under the mindset, I'm going to show it, I'm going to do it, and I'm done. Like no questions. Like if you didn't get it, I'm under the interpretation that whether I showed it twice or 3 times, if I showed it 7 times, you're still going to mess it up when I tell you to go drill it.
Yeah.
So I might as well let the people go who were paying attention and then go help that person after. That's just it's a better use of everybody's time.
Yeah. Plus the student will learn to actually pay more attention the next time.
Yeah.
Do you have any other pieces of advice for coaches in this regard? How can they become better?
I think people need to like really drill down. And the one thing John's really good at is he understands like the core concept of what you need to get a technique to work. Like he could probably pull out like 3 or 4 principles of like, what are your 3 like key points to like hitting a pendulum sweep? Teach that. Ignore like all these like fabricated things that you're saying to make yourself sound intelligent. Just teach those 3 things and be done. Right? Because the rest of it is 100% made up, because what if the partner doesn't react that way? Right? So just get those core 3 principles across, teach them, and let your students do that, and then let them grow as athletes. Because if you have to spell out A to Z everything in jiu-jitsu or even judo, you're never going to get to the point where you can coach somebody to a championship level. The only way people get to a championship level is if they're intelligent enough to figure some of it out on their own.
If they put their own mental efforts into it.
Yeah. They've got to be a student of the game. It's like all those naysayers on my Instagram account, like they're not students of the sport. They have no idea why that technique works. And the reason why it works is because of those idiots. because they actually, because they're not paying attention. They're just like, I'm going to arm drag you. But they have no idea that the 3-time Olympian, the John Danaher Gracie Black Belt, that trains with everybody, why can he arm drag me and they can't?
Yeah.
It's like, they just don't get it. They just see the opportunity for an arm drag, but they don't understand the repercussion because I've opened up the door a little bit and they think they can run through it, right? There's a difference between creating opportunity for yourself and then trying to counter the opportunity left by somebody. And great grapplers create opportunity.
Yeah.
Average grapplers wait for opportunity. And when you wait for opportunity, like when I leave that arm drag open and you open up your guard to try to shift your hips around, like done, guard open, no problem. You still can't make it there.
So it's a matter of improving your fighters and actually martial artist intelligence, actually.
Yeah, like educating people, making them students of the game so that like a lot of times when I'm coaching, I just ask my students, like, what are you doing? Because I may not be able to understand it, but they're making it up, right? But maybe even if it doesn't work, their thought process is right. And that's what's more important. It's not about who wins and loses. It's, does my blue belt, who's making up this thing against a purple belt, is his thought process sound in what he's trying to do? Because there's a difference between thinking it and physically being able to do it. And he may have a gap there where he knows where he's trying to go, but he can't physically get there. And I'm looking at it like, where are you going? What are you trying to do? And I'll stop him and be like, hey, just explain this to me. Like, use your words.
Mhm.
And maybe they're right. And they just can't do it. And that's what I want to see from all of my students. Just that thought that you put into it instead of the like, I don't know, I'm just
Going
trying to
with the
make some
flow.
stuff up. Yeah, like that's not okay.
Mhm. It's not respectful either to you as a coach, nor for them. Just to go off a little bit of the tangent, because in order not to take too much of your time, because we're already 50 minutes in, we've said that we'll be lasting for around an hour. Um, if you had to pick out like maybe one, two, maybe three pieces of advice to someone who has scarcely trained stand up, or who has actually, in this case, scarcely trained judo and has been butt scooting his first year or two, or maybe even three in jiu-jitsu, what would you advise them? Like, from which, what's the point A for them in judo? Like, is the point A first to learn the principles? And is within that point A or within the point B or whatever, um, are there any specific moves, specific techniques, specific throwing techniques actually that they can go from the very beginning?
I think the number one thing that people who are jujitsu players specifically that want to learn, the takedown game and the throwing game and the wrestling game to better their jujitsu, I think they need to focus more on just falling.
Mm.
Like, not for nothing, but like I've seen the start of like big jujitsu schools and like their forward rolling classes and like their break falls, and it's like it doesn't look good.
Mm.
I don't know if that makes sense. Like, yes, you can do a forward roll, but you can't make it look pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to actually practice the art of like taking a fall and being able to fall to the floor safely and becoming comfortable with it. Because the biggest problem jiu-jitsu players have is they're just nervous, and you can see it in their posture. They're like hunched over, they're afraid, and they're like, no, I'm in my wrestling stance. And it's like, well, how come every time I move you flinch?
Yeah. Mm.
And because they're so uncomfortable with the idea of somebody actually taking them down and hitting the floor, it's not even about winning and losing. It's just the act of hitting the ground. It makes people nervous.
Mm.
And so if they can overcome that fear, like, wrestlers are good at it. Like, a wrestler could blast you with a double and you wouldn't feel a thing, right? They know how to manipulate the body in the air to turn it more into a roll. No different than I know how to throw you with a throw, and I can either make it hurt or I can make it not hurt.
Mm.
Back to the Instagram thing and all the naysayers, like, you can't take my back when I throw you. I'm choosing to roll over my partner because I do not want to break his ribs.
Mm.
Right? Like, I'd like him to come back and shoot more Instagram clips.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
so you can post negative comments.
yeah, because they don't understand.
Yeah.
They're just at a loss.
Mm.
But it's learning how to do that and getting yourself comfortable so that you can stand on your feet and get comfortable with the idea, like, yeah, you may get taken down, but I'm okay with that. Like, I don't mind.
So,
and it's being open to that idea and that concept. Because if you're open to being taken down, that means you're open to take somebody down. It's very hard, unless there's a massive skill gap, to being in a position where you can't be taken down, but also in a position to score.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Against two people of the same skill, that doesn't really exist.
Mm.
Like, if they can't get in on you to take you down or throw you or shoot, you probably can't take a shot on them effectively either. So you got to be willing to give and get a little in the stand-up game.
Yeah, I mean, you have to expose yourself to the risk in order to, get rewards. But
Yeah.
that fear of like being taken down, that could be overcome by, of course, practicing being taken down and the break falls and everything a little bit more. Do you have any sort of other advice that you would advise for someone who is afraid of falling? How do you deal with, your own students? You probably have your own students who are a little bit more reluctant, in terms of jiu-jitsu, of course, to the more of a to the throwing game. How do you?
I actually don't teach takedowns that often at my school, which is odd because I have a really nice sprung floor.
Okay.
designed
Doesn't hurt too much.
specifically for that. Yeah, like and I have crash pads down there, and we don't do it.
Right.
But because the rules of jujitsu
Ah.
don't like, it's 100% useless.
Hmm.
Like if I spent 20% of my time perfecting their stand up, and then they go into one BJJ competition and the guy pulls guard, I've
Yeah.
wasted 20% of my students' time.
Hmm. Hmm.
Therefore, there's 20% less time to teach them the actual art of jujitsu, which is on the ground, considering there's basically no stand up. There's just like a free for all for whatever you could possibly learn. They're at a deficit.
Hmm.
And I just want to make sure that they have the tools they need in order to perform the sport in which they came to me from.
Yeah.
Even like a lot of I have D1 wrestlers at my school that like, the only thing I do with them is make sure they know how to take the shots they do and apply it to jiu-jitsu because it's different.
Hmm.
That way they don't get stuck in those front headlocks like I used to.
So it's basically down to the specificity of the sport. So there's no such
Yeah.
need to, to go full in terms of throws. Of course, makes sense.
I teach more guard pulling into sweeps, basic single leg, basic double leg, and that's usually it.
Yeah, again, not making it too complicated, right?
Yeah.
Just to wrap it, we're at the 1 hour limit. One piece of advice for white and blue belts. What's the number one or two mistakes that you see them make most of?
I'll give a couple. First one, be able to actually articulate what your coach just taught you before you try to do it physically. Two, don't go based on feeling. Okay. If you're trying to learn a new technique or you're trying to do something in jiu-jitsu and you think it feels right, you're wrong. I guarantee you're wrong. It's a brand new activity. We move in some funky ways that are not natural to people of just everyday life, right? So it should feel weird. Three, don't base winning and losing on the outcome of every individual technique. Understand that there are counters for everything. Understand the 5 steps it takes in order to accomplish the technique and understand where you went wrong, but that doesn't mean your technique needs to be reworked. A lot of times, white and blue belts, when they're going against purple belts, it's a matter of strength and conditioning within the movement that they suffer in, which means they're doing everything right, but the move itself isn't strong enough to actually accomplish against somebody who is a little bit higher of a caliber. So don't try to change your technique. Try to make the technique stronger by doing more reps, by doing more drills, by trying it in live training more often, even though it's not working. Stick it out for the long run.
Okay. So
those would be my 3.
Okay. So it's basically like stick to the things that work, even though they might not work for you in the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, man.
Basics win championships.
Yeah, it's always been like that. What I want to say is like, this is basically the end. If you have anything to share, like what are your future plans? We've seen that you're putting a lot more content in the last couple of weeks, in the last couple of months, actually, on YouTube. As far as I've understood, it's like 5 videos each week that you're aiming for.
I think YouTube is up to like 5 pre-recorded technique videos. And then I'm doing 6 live streams a week.
So what can we expect from all of that? Is that some part of a bigger project, or is it just something that you're taking day by day?
It's something I'm taking day by day. I'm at a point right now where like I love just being home. Like I have spent most of my life just traveling around the world. Right? Like for me to like pack a bag, get my gi, go teach a seminar for, 20 people, 50 people for like $5,000, that's kind of a headache. And like some people are like, man, but you're getting paid to do this. And I'm like, and you get to stay home every weekend. Why can't I? And so I'm hoping to like grow a community on YouTube where like people have access to a higher level of knowledge. If that's what you think I have, then that's where you can find it. Where people can actually show up and maybe run, a virtual school online where like people around the world can actually like communicate and conversate and like ask questions and get answers. Like one of the guys on my channel last night was like, hey man, can you just explain that guard pass that I did on Instagram yesterday? And I was like, let's do it. And so I'm trying to throw up these workshops where they're kind of theme based. Like one was judo for gripping, one was guard passing last night, one was BJJ takedowns. We're like, hey, if you're struggling in this area and you want a little bit of advice for whatever it's worth, like ask. I'll tell you what I think straight up. And you could take it or you could leave it. Some people probably think I'm totally off my rocker and I know nothing about jiu-jitsu. Like the people who think they could take my back.
Yeah, right. An arm drag, actually.
But some people, like, they're just looking for information. And, not everybody has John Danaher or Gordon or Henzo or Marcelo or Andre as coaches. Right? And there's only so much you can learn from an instructional DVD. Because again, you're not a real student. Like you're not able to like look at it and recall it and remember it. And there's all these little nuances, even myself, that we do that sometimes we're not aware of when we film the instructional. And it gives athletes a chance to, ask those types of questions to get clarity on the things that they're trying to learn. And I'm just trying to provide that.
Yeah, I personally believe I've seen it actually to benefit my own game, and it's a great approach in my own opinion to, not just provide value for others, but to connect with them. And I think that you're doing a tremendous job in that, man.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just trying to, everybody's stuck at home. It started as like, hey, everybody's stuck at home. Let's give away some free stuff for people.
Yeah, it's a noble approach. Travis, thank you very much. We won't be taking too much of your time anymore. Thank you for coming, and thank you for taking the time for our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, man.